Hello and welcome to this episode of the Fernando de Veras Show. If this is your first time here, my name is Fernando de Veras. And on this channel, we talk about things that are happening with the community, with the culture, with politics. And I try to break it down in a way that hopefully helps people to make sense of things that are happening in our world today. And for today's episode, I'm very excited to share with y'all a conversation that I had with a friend of mine who I consider to be a comrade in the online education space. Mario, founder of the online platform Unidos Podemos. Mario is a Mexican-American Marine Corps veteran who first started the page Unidos Podemos as a way to tell his own story and share about his experiences growing up between two worlds. The posts that he shares on his platform emphasize the importance of having pride in your cultural identity and the power that comes from learning our own history. So without further ado, here's my conversation with Mario from Unidos Podemos. Mario, thank you again for joining me to talk today, brother.
Yeah, no problem, man. Thank you for having me.
So I wanted to give you a chance to just explain, tell a little bit about yourself first and foremost, share your story, but then also what led you to make the page Unidos Podemos.
I was born in the United States. I was raised in Mexico, in Guadalajara, Jalisco, for about since I like 6 years old. Then that's when my shit had me very young, and I started growing up. I was like around that time frame. There was a lot of problems that went on, and my mom saw it like there's not. I don't see much of a future for myself and for my child here. So we came right back. So with that, it was a big culture shock to me. So I had to pretty much obviously understand the language. I had no idea what people were telling me. When people were talking, I cried a lot. I got bullied a lot for not understanding it. And the crazy part about it is I got bullied and everything by my own culture. But it was by other Hispanics. But that in itself, I grew up having to understand a whole nother life because in Mexico, I had my grandparents, I had my family, I had everybody. And my grandparents were very well known around the pueblo that they lived in. And everywhere I went, everybody knew me. Everybody was always nice to me. Then I came back to the United States, it's like everything was just wiped out. Like nobody knew me. No, everybody just made fun of me. And like I was always kind of like just I learned to pretty much seclude myself and just start taking care of myself. Um, and with that, came a lot of just worrying about myself and my own survival. As my own mom, like she was working, she had to like worry about herself and learn how to survive for herself and me. Just how to provide. So she didn't have much of time to give to me, as besides the normal things of like working. With all that being said, I was never good in school. I just didn't care for education and everything. A lot of that had to do with now as an adult, I came to realize I had ADHD, so that had a lot to do with it. So I never cared for it. I never paid attention. I never really cared for it. I got involved in a lot of situations where I was trying to fit in, trying to belong to something because I was lost. I just like this goes back to everything that I just mentioned, being from two worlds. I didn't know where I belonged. Got involved in a lot of bad situations. With that, I joined the United States military in the Marine Corps. I served for 7 years. From there, it was a whole nother culture that I learned. The page itself, it was more of a accident. I like to describe it as it grew as an accident strategically almost. So pretty much what I mean by that is I was doing my master's degree. I went in, I got my bachelor's and I decided to go in and straight up doing my master's. And doing my master's, I had to do this project where I needed to essentially explain something. We had to come up with some sort of idea, some sort of creativity event, something, explain it, go deep into it and create something physical about it. And how I like, I love storytelling. I love the media and everything like that. So during my project, essentially was I had no idea what I wanted to do. So talking with my teachers and professors, it's kind of helped me out because I was telling them like I really have no idea what I want to do. It was around the moment also where things started getting a lot heavier with the whole ICE and with Trump being in office and racism and all this stuff. So it's like, I'm seeing you seeing so much division. I would love to pretty much have a way that I could explain this feeling. This is me talking to like my teachers and like, like trying to explain what it is that I'm feeling at the same time of trying to like come up with an idea. And I'm telling them like I want to be able to explain to people why it is that, as Mexican Americans here in the United States, they're waving their Mexican flags. They're so proud, like they're like we're so loud with our pride and everything. And like it's because like it's not that we don't like the United States, because we just as well, we wave the United States of American flag, but we're just have extreme pride of where we come from because of our lineage. It goes way back. All have family members in Mexico and everything. And as I'm explaining this, obviously the teacher's like, do you know that there's a word for that feeling? And I was like, no. Like I had no idea. She's like, yeah, it's called diaspora. Never in my life have I heard that word mentioned. I feel like ever. So like diaspora, like I have never heard. Like, yeah, like it's pretty much like the feeling that a person has when you're from two worlds, essentially. Like you're from two cultures, two traditions, two languages, and you're kind of like stuck in the middle, don't know how to kind of like go about life. And that's essentially what you're explaining. You're trying to explain that. And ever since that, that's pretty much what launched my idea. Like just having that one conversation and having her explain that to me, like, okay, that makes sense. Like, but I've never heard of this, so that's when I dove deeper into it. And when I was diving deeper into it, it's like, how do you explain a feeling to people? How do you because you can't just tell somebody, like when it comes to feelings, people have to experience it themselves in order to understand that. Like, what's another, like, obviously I can't experience it for them, but what's another way that I could like like show them why it is that we feel the way that we do nowadays. And with that it was like, okay, I think I have to like bring it to the root, the history. How did the Mexican American kind of culture develop itself? Like how did we get where we are right now?
I wanted to go back to some of the stuff that you were talking about. You said that so the page Unidos Podemos started with this college project for your master's degree. Is that right?
Yeah, yep, that's exactly how it started.
Yeah, and what you mentioned about how your professor gives you that language, gives you that vocabulary of the diaspora. That's something that I feel like with the work that we do, my partner Leslie and I, we try to really emphasize the importance of having the language to describe what's going on and to understand our experience and what other people are experiencing. Um, like, what are some of the other terms and like frameworks that you've learned that you feel like you didn't have back in the day? Like, I'll give the example for myself. Like I knew that my family came from Mexico. I know that my mom was an immigrant. I didn't know that she was undocumented until a couple years later. She told me that she and all my tios and tias, they came illegally. And then I learned about amnesty. Like I didn't know what amnesty was when I was little. The difference between residency and citizenship. And then like you learn all those like legal terms, and then you learn the history about like how did this border come here in the first place? How did Mexico become Mexico and the US became the US? Like what are some of the things that you learned that you wasn't like a part of your education or your upbringing when you were little that helped you to see things differently as you got older and you started to learn more about that?
Yeah, like I mentioned, I didn't really care much for the education, so I never listened. As opposed to like I always seen how everybody else was somewhat educated, or when they spoke, they're like, "Oh, I've heard this word, I've heard of that," and it's like every now and then it's like I've never heard that, but I've come to realize is like I'd never heard it because I just didn't pay attention. Going back, touching on the subject of understanding and knowing words and having just people like kind of talk to you about specific events or specific wordings of like situations and events, how the life is as a Mexican American. Uh, my mother herself, she is a United States citizen. She was born in the United States as well, but she has similar story to how I mentioned how she had me. My grandparents, they were immigrants. They came to the United States. As they were working here in the United States, they had my mother and one of my aunts, and soon, like a couple years, maybe like 3, 4 years, not even, they went back to Mexico. So for the rest of her life, my mother lived in Mexico, so she didn't know English. She didn't know nothing about the United States either. There's nothing, but she had papers. That was the only leeway that she had. So when we came back, we still struggled. It was kind of like it's difficult for me to describe it because I said like we kind of had the same struggles that you would say like an immigrant family would have, like learning the language, learning the culture, learning how to survive and everything. But the only difference there is that since we both had papers, we were both United States citizens, we didn't have that fear of, well, at least my mother at that time back then, she didn't have that fear of having to be deported or like when is that time going to come for us, that we're getting grabbed and stuff like that. So I've come to realize when I was older now because she never had those conversations. Like I never remember having or anybody for the aspect telling me or talking to me about, hey, this is how we need to take care of ourselves. If you hear this or if you see this, ICE, immigration, whatever it is, you need to, conduct yourself this way or hide and stuff like that. So I didn't grow up with that. So therefore, with that is I didn't really dive or really truly understand of the whole history of America and all these fancy wordings to describe citizenship, like you mentioned, and undocumented versus documented immigration. And honestly, like I've talked to my wife before about this. Like when I think about it back when we first moved to the United States, I didn't know. I didn't know what a Hispanic was, a Latino. I just know what Mexicans were because I was from Mexico. So when I came to the United States, it's a whole bunch of cultures. I didn't know that other Latinos existed. I always thought it's just Mexicans. That's it. And you have your Dominicans, Puerto Ricans, Cubans, Venezuelans, all this stuff. So it was like not only is it like a culture shock of learning Spanish, it's a culture shock, whole culture shock of understanding that there's other kind of cultures that speak Spanish as well, and are involved in the same kind of process and feeling of being immigrants and everything like that. So just that in itself was a part of how I grew up, not really being aware, I guess.
Mhm. Yeah.
Like we're like aware of these kind of fears and ways of living that a typical immigrant would typically
Yeah. Just
thrive in.
like the reality, like that's I like what you said there. Like I didn't know there were other kinds of Latinos.
Yeah.
I think I had the same thing. Like when I grew up, I knew I was Mexican. I didn't know what that meant necessarily. Like, I visited Mexico a couple times when I was little, and I even lived there for,
Word.
it was just
Yeah.
like, oh, that's what I am. Like if people ask you, you're this. But
Yeah.
again, I had no connection to that history. I knew not like I couldn't tell you who the president of Mexico was, at that time. And
Yeah.
so like that was just something that was absent. And then yeah, like I didn't know about El Salvador, Nicaragua, Honduras, any of those countries. I knew Latino just because, like the Latin Kings of Comedy, George Lopez and them. I knew
Yeah.
like that idea of, oh, it's brown people. Brown people living in the US. I guess we're called Latinos now. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah,
No, that's a good point right there too. Like that when it comes to like those type of shows like George Lopez and like I know there was other shows, not that many, but maybe like one or two, like similar to like that George Lopez. And when those come out, it was like I remember myself thinking, oh, like that's that's like because like growing up, you're not being taught about like how to succeed and like wealth and like how to be rich and all this stuff, right? So when you see another Latino or another Hispanic on TV, to me it was like, oh man, like we could actually do that. Like we could actually have that type of success. So yeah, just a little sidetrack, but
yeah.
like yeah,
No, that's
another
that conversation on like representation. That's a whole nother one. But I wanted to go back to a couple things you mentioned too. You said that you were born in the U.S. Your mom takes you to Mexico. You grow up there, and then like around 6 years old, you get back to the U.S.
yeah
And when you're here, that you didn't fit in, and struggled to learn the language and felt isolated. That's almost exactly my mom's experience because she was born in Mexico. came here when she was 7 years old, and I asked her about it, like, what was it like when you came here? And she was like, I got picked on all the time because I dressed funny, and
Yeah,
I couldn't speak English, and so people made fun of me, and I would eat lunch by myself. And I was like,
yeah,
what does that do to a kid? Like that's its own form of, my partner Leslie talks a lot about what are some of those wounds that we carry from childhood and how does that show up later down the line? Like that's a wound to be taken from your community, from that village, that pueblo, where everybody knows your name, you know everybody else, and you have that
yeah.
support. That's something that we really try to stress in our conversations with families is like we all deserve to have that, but because of the conditions in our home countries, for whatever reason, whether it was war, violence, poverty, that led us to come here to the US to survive, like we lost out on that. And like what would our families look like if we didn't lose out on that? And if we could have stayed home? But yeah, if you got any thoughts
It's
on that.
no man, yeah, that's definitely it's a bittersweet feeling of having this type of life that we had, living in Mexico or the United States or wherever. So however it is, because it's like you understand again two worlds. You understand the life in the United States, you understand the life in Mexico. And to touch a little bit more in context of it is when obviously my whole young life I've always wanted to go back. I cried for many years just because I just didn't want to be here. I just didn't fit in. And then when I as I got older, I would feel like this kind of I wouldn't say it was like that like mental health kind of depression. It was more of like just being sad, like just really like like I just I cannot put myself like I don't fit in anywhere. Like I've always like there you always have these people that have their own groups and their own friends and cliques, and you're just kind of like on the sidelines. For one, probably because you just I became very antisocial, and because I didn't know how to speak for a long time. I was always just trying to like understand it. So that in itself made me very socially awkward. So I just didn't know how to even go up to like maybe like a group of people, a group of friends, and be like, "Hey, want to chill or something?" Just something simple like that, right? It's just I just didn't know how to do that for a while, and that in itself kind of just pushed me away even further as life went on. And that's another big thing that I like to touch up on through Unidos Podemos is that feeling of wanting to be in Mexico, like loving it because you have your family, that's where you have your nostalgia, all your memories, how you grew up, like just that warm feeling of Mexico. But in the same time, you understand that you already have your life in the United States. It's you understand that there is more opportunity here in the United States. Like this is the sad truth. Can you make it in Mexico? Can you make things happy? Yeah, of course. But it's the fact of like you have at this point, like for example, me, I have spent most of my life more now in the United States than I have in Mexico now. Most of my life in Mexico now at this point I just have been visiting my grandparents or my family members out there. So it's that one of the part of that feeling of having to explain that people here that haven't gone through that do not understand. Because from that's where those comments or those feelings of other people saying, no, if you're born in America, you're American. That's it. Like that's no. Like obviously
Yeah.
for me, for a top like that, just that's not how it's not that simple. It's not that black and white. There's more that goes into it. I try to be very understand. I've come to be understanding of listening to like multiple opinions and stuff because I can see where they come from because they only have one culture. This is how they grew up. This United States has just been it. They haven't experienced anything. They haven't grown up in other worlds like other like people like us have. So they don't have that grip and reality of two worlds
Yeah.
to pretty much go off of.
Well, it's almost like, it's people who never leave the hometown. And they're like, this is why
Yeah.
would I ever leave? Everyone I know here, everyone I know is here, everything I like is here. But yeah, like you said, if you have those roots, if you have that connection to somewhere else, and you have that experience of knowing that there is more than this, then
Yeah.
then yeah, you feel that pull, right? But yeah, I know you shared a post earlier too, this week talking about um, what was it? It was along those lines of like, if you're born here, you're American, end of story.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I pretty much trying to touch upon like pretty much that area I just mentioned. Just those people that even like some Hispanics, like Mexican Americans, have this same sentiment. Like those that have only been born here. Like you have those. I've come to realize through the page that it's a lot of people from Texas that have these kind of opinions. Not just Texas, but most of like come from like of like, oh well, I'm I'm three generations from Texas. I'm not from Mexico, I'm born here. Like I'm not Mexican, I'm American. Oh, like that's fine. Like that's where I come from is that's your opinion, that's cool. I'm not arguing with you about your feelings and your experiences. Like what I'm coming from is I'm explaining that if you still okay, you're three generations in the United States or from Texas, if you go back maybe two, three, four more generations, you're gonna find your ass back in Mexico. That's what I'm trying to explain to people.
Well, let me add to that too, because like if your family's from Texas, you might not even be going back to Mexico. You might be in those same routes. You might be on that same plot of land, but it's just the line moved, the border shifted down, and now you're in the US.
Exactly. Yep. Yes. So going back to how we first started this conversation of how the account started and me started to dive into the history and everything because I didn't know a lot of the history myself. Again, like till maybe 2 years ago, in full context. As you grow up now, you hear events here, events there, like, oh, this happened, the Alamo, like this type of stuff. But that's it. Like you just hear the titles, you hear the subject lines, but you don't really go or understand the full context or history that goes behind it. And for a long time, I've heard it, but I just didn't really care. A lot of times because I was just very, I guess I would say, ignorant to the fact because I was just like, oh, it doesn't affect me. Like it have nothing to do with me and stuff like that. That I had that mindset for a while, and now that I'm going back into it, it's like, man, first of all, I'm starting to realize like a lot of this history, even though I didn't pay, like I mentioned, I didn't pay a lot of attention in school, this was still not in the history books. Because yeah, you would hear about, the slavery, African Americans, like all their history of how things happen. There's a couple like historic like, events here and there in the histories about maybe the Mexican Americans, but not a lot of like the bigger events. Like I don't remember like even hearing the titles or the events, the subject lines like I mentioned being mentioned ever. So as I started going into it, trying to understand how this Mexican culture has evolved to what it is today, it started seeing as like damn, I really don't understand. Everything makes more sense when you start understanding the history, when you start understanding the events, how all the pieces and the bricks kind of started laying on top of each other to lay out the foundation to put us where we are at now. And with that, obviously, so I understood all that history. I put it all together. And at first, it started to kind of touch a little more on how the account actually started is I created a video. It was almost like a test video. Like I said, I like storytelling. I like through media, creating videos, like cinematic videos and stuff like that. So like I really got stuck on the fact of like I want to explain this feeling as best as possibly I can because everywhere I looked, like this feeling has never been described. Even at the moment where I was trying to find examples or some motivation, I couldn't find anything really. It was like one or two videos about diaspora and just explaining the definition and but nothing that truly called to me like yes, like that's exactly how it feels. That is like something that will grab you, and tell you, make you feel like you're understood. So it took me a while. It was mostly like an experimental video that I did. So I wrote a poem. Not necessarily. Yeah, it's like an. I try putting my all of my ideas into paper and then just put them together as best as possible as I can. Like everything that I felt, everything that I've gone through, everything like nostalgic feeling, events, everything that you could possibly go through as a Mexican American that might give you that feeling, I put it into a video. And it's like a short, less than 3 minute video that I put in there about literally just that Mexican American nostalgia and explain the video as best as I could. And with that, I posted that video and it went viral. It uh, when I say viral, not that like crazy, like it just got millions of views, but these like enough in the hundreds of thousands of views and people commenting and liking. And through those comments, obviously the account started getting some more like some traction, engagement. And but what most caught my eye was that through the comments, everybody kind of put in their input, their own views on things. I started seeing a lot of people saying thank you. Oh, like I didn't know anybody else felt like this, or even I didn't know that this is what I was feeling. So it's like it was a lot of those kind of comments. It's like something that told me like this has never been addressed, and we are all living with this feeling that we do not understand, or either we know that there's something there, but we don't know how to express it or put it into words. And so that's pretty much what I did with that video. And that's right there. That's pretty much how that account was born through that video alone. And then obviously I started posting more similar content uh, as best as possible I could. Later on, I started posting about the actual historic events, making carousel posts and everything like that, separate posts, like just to explain, like, yeah, okay, this is the feeling, this Mexican American feeling that we have. But to understand why you feel the way that you do, this is your history. This is why you feel the way that you do. This is what our ancestors, our people went through to be here that have given us this feeling.
When you said like, you wrote a poem to try to like encapsulate everything that you were feeling and everything you were thinking. Something that we talk about is how many people are like, can you go up to your homies and be like, "Hey man, I wrote this poem. Can I read it to you real quick?" Like how many
It's
people just feel like that's not something they can do, that they have permission to do, that they have the ability to do, you know?
Yeah, yeah, no, you're right, man. Like when I wrote that, the only person that I probably read it to was my wife. Just like physically, personally, it was just my wife. I didn't have any of my homies or nothing because you still have that thing of like, oh, if I read to my homies, you're gonna talk shit. That's all they're gonna because all they're gonna do. And I wanted like honest feedback. Besides like somebody close that I read it to, obviously I did this during my like I mentioned my class, one of my master's class. I read it to the class and everything like that, just to like obviously it was part of my homework, part of like the project that I had to do. So I read it out loud. I read it to the teacher, and with even through them, like a lot of them, like I was the old. I always found myself being like the only Mexican in wherever I go, almost. Or even if there is other Hispanics or Mexicans, I will say I'm the only paisa. Like in other words, like paisa, like that's there. But
But
when I
for
read
okay,
this
for
to
for
them,
for people who maybe don't know that word, because a lot of Latinos know that
yeah,
word.
yeah.
What's paisa mean? How do you describe that?
Oh man, I guess how do you describe that word? Paisa, like I guess for us, like Mexicans, I will describe it as in like un paisano, like like we're from Mexico. We understand. We come from that same background in Mexico. We use that Mexican slang. We're involved in the culture day in and day out. And as opposed to like I mentioned, like a Hispanic that is not that grew up only here in the United States, like we were talking about earlier, and that's all they know. They're not really involved in their culture as much as they could be. We call ourselves paisas. Like
Yeah.
we just kind of like we distinguish ourselves, and that's not me talking smack or anything on the other end, because like that's just the way that we kind of distinguish ourselves. Like, oh no, he's a paisa.
Yeah.
It is
Well,
a paisano.
I remember in school, like, if someone called you a paisa, Like them's fighting words when I was in middle school. They were talking shit on
Growing up, yeah, yeah. Now it's a enduring, like kind of homie
like
type of word.
yeah, now there's a little more respect on the name.
Yeah, yeah.
But you were saying wherever you went, like, in your class or in other places, you felt like you were representing the culture in that way.
Yeah, man, that's one thing that I've always had about me is like, even though like yeah, I grew up the way that I did, I've always had this sense of like adventure towards me or like experimental. Like I always want to learn new things. And I've come to the point like because of so much like hardship and everything I went through, I've come to kind of like put my mind in a way like, I don't care if I'm uncomfortable in situations. I will put myself in uncomfortable situations without it, like any real like concern, like so and me putting myself in those kind of situations has allowed me to learn and experience so much more. And in those events, I've always happened to, like I said, be the only like Hispanic, like in those events, in those classes, and like, whatever it is that I'm doing, I've always found myself to be the only one. And like fun, I guess thinking deeper into that is I've come to realize the reason because of that is us growing up is just that we are kind of like taught as very young to kind of stay to yourself, stay to your own people, like don't explore more than you have to. You need to do this in order to be successful, to get a good job. That's it. And I've come to realize that has a big impact on how our culture in itself has grown to be, like not putting ourselves out there and engaging more. But where I was going with why I was the only one there was because a lot of the other students there, were Americans, white, African American, and just by me reading them that poem, like my project, a lot of them were like they loved it. They're like, wow, like even though like I have never experienced that, I felt it. Like I understood it. Like I understood where you were coming from. And then another thing that I loved is there were a lot of like, Asians, like maybe like Chinese American or like just other cultures like American that they were like, I'm not Mexican American, but I resonate with that 100%. Like just take the Mexican and put my culture in there and it's the same thing. Like I resonate with that feeling. So all that just kind of gave me the encouragement and the power to keep going with this account, keep posting, keep keep kind of like explaining this feeling, the culture, where we come from and everything. And slowly but surely the account started growing. It grew fairly quickly. Like I want to say from a year, like in a year, it grew to like 250K, like fast, like in following.
Yeah, that's huge. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah.
So like with that, obviously it told me like there's people that resonate with this, like people
Yeah.
that are looking for this kind of knowledge or this kind of feeling, or somebody just to be like, they get me, or there's somebody that's trying to put our culture out there and explaining who we are, why we do this, why we feel the way that we do, without being scared, you know, without being having somebody threatening them or using words to to try and stop you from expressing yourself.
Yeah, man. And what I've seen is people are hungry for the again, like what we were talking about earlier, just like the language to describe what they're feeling. You know, so my partner Leslie does work where we talk about like how to heal from intergenerational trauma, and one of the things that we do when we're talking about those things is we want people to be able to name what they already know in themselves, like in their body, but they don't have the words for it. So, like if we
Yeah.
say like when you're angry, where are you angry? Are you angry here? Are you angry here? Are you angry here?
Understanding yourself, being self-aware of yourself is incredibly powerful.
Yeah,
Like,
and
let,
so like well, like you were saying, when you were little, you felt like you weren't necessarily depressed, but you felt sad. Like
yeah,
a little kid only knows a handful of ways to describe how they feel. I'm happy, I'm sad, I'm mad, I'm scared, I'm nervous, you know?
No, for sure, man. And that's me saying that now is me understanding and realizing now that I'm older. Obviously, when we're little, I was just like I don't like this. That's all I could come. Like I don't want to be here. I cried. I didn't understand what was happening. I didn't understand this feeling. Like why are we even here? Like if we're struggling, let's just go back. I didn't understand the whole concept of my mom understanding the fact of being here. It's going to be a lot more beneficial for us in the future than you are going to see right now.
Yeah, but like that's kind of what I'm getting at is like obviously, when you're a little kid, you don't know the full picture, you don't know the story, and so you just feel trapped, you feel lost, you feel angry maybe, and then as you get older, you're able to put words to that and you're able to process that, and now you feel a little lighter, you feel like you can breathe. And then you share that with the world and you realize you're not the only person because your family's not the only one who's had an experience like you. Maybe, there's details that are different here and there, but like you were saying earlier, there's other people from different cultures, whether it's Chinese Americans, Vietnamese Americans, people coming from countries like I had a friend who came from Palestine. His father was born in Palestine, and then they had to leave because of the Nakba in 1948, and they go to Kuwait, and they're there for a little while, and Lebanon, and then eventually they land here in the U.S. And his dad is like, he's a shell of who he was back home, and he's depressed, and he's resorting to alcohol to cope. And like I grew up in Little Saigon, which is in Garden Grove here in Orange County, and I think it's the most populated or what is it? It's the largest concentration of Vietnamese Americans or of Vietnamese people anywhere outside of Vietnam is Little Saigon. And so
Okay.
I grew up with a lot of friends who were Vietnamese, and I never knew their stories, but I knew that they had parents who were struggling back home. I knew that they had parents who were maybe emotionally distant
Yeah.
because they had that experience too of having to leave their home country because of a war and then coming here to the US, not speaking the language, struggling to find work that paid them well, housing, losing your community, right? And so, like, again, just to kind of bring it back, when you share your story in that way, you're gonna find connection because other people feel what you feel, but then you're also gonna be you're opening a door for people to understand themselves and to
Yeah.
and to really rewrite their own story because a lot of times I feel like we just kind of numb and distract ourselves from what we're feeling.
That's a good point. Everything that you just mentioned, man. Like it doesn't matter what kind of culture, what culture you come from. We're all one and the same. Like whether you're Hispanic, you're Vietnamese, Chinese, like whatever it is, like we all one and the same. If you're coming from another country, like trying to survive and understand another culture here in the United States, and with all that comes a lot of what we're talking about here, not understanding how to express our feelings because our parents, our grandparents were the same. Like they were just bottle it out up. It doesn't matter. Just suck it up. It's his life. You need to just go. Just work. Like don't mind this feeling, this sadness. It's not gonna do nothing for you. Just work, get ahead in life, and that's it. And we have all got into also take on that same feeling that we just don't know how to express any of it. And I was the same. And when I say all this, I'm not saying that I've always been perfect. I've always been a person that knows how to express myself because, like, if we talked about, like, I had no idea how to properly explain, like, express myself. Because through all that, like, I went through a whole period of like I drank a lot. I did a lot of stuff that I shouldn't have done or gotten myself into for that mere fact of I wasn't properly self-aware of who I was, what I was feeling internally, why I was even feeling it, where was it coming from, all of that stuff. And then once you start to understand all that and feel it, it now comes the work of expressing it in a way that you could put it outside of your mind. And with that it's a whole nother it's a whole nother like mission in itself. And what I mean by that is I felt that I was like okay enough to like I was I know how to express myself. I'm self-aware enough now of like everything. I have this account, and even with that first video that I mentioned of like just putting that poem out there, first of all, it's like, oh, this is kind of ridiculous. I'm doing a poem, like I'm like people are just gonna make fun of me, like they're just gonna like, oh, like you're gay, bro. Like then
Yeah, I wanted to pause on what you were saying right there about like the hesitancy, the reluctance to share your poem, and your the word poem has like this connotation in our brain. You hear the word poem and
feminine,
you think
feminine,
feminine, you
yeah,
think uh yeah, gay. Like when you're younger,
soft.
yeah, soft. But then like, we think of people like Tupac, the street poet. And
That's a
we
good point.
and
Yeah,
just hip hop in general is like its own form of poetry. But I think that bit of like, I mentioned it earlier, like how many people are unable to share what they're really feeling because they're worried about, especially men. And I think this is, important for people like you and me and the platform that we have and the ways that we use our platform is we when you are able to do that, and yeah, you are going to get made fun of. There are some people who are going to be like, this is whack, this is gay, this is whatever. But
yeah,
you're going to find a lot more people who appreciate it, and a lot more people who are uh by seeing you do that are unlocking something in themselves. And I
yeah,
know, like for myself, again, in our city here in Santana, there's a lot of we have a lot of gang culture, there's a lowrider culture, uh and there's just a lot of machista, like machismo in the
yeah,
community.
yeah,
But I know that the kind of stories that I talk about are resonating with a lot of the men coming from those communities who are finally able to point and say, "Oh, this guy's onto something. Maybe we can do things a little
yeah.
differently, and maybe we can be more open with how we really feel, and not just feel like we got to put up this front."
No, for sure, man. That's a very important point to like touch base up on. Because yeah, like I mentioned, it took me a good bit, like, even after I had created that video, it took me I want to say a good probably week and a half to kind of find and be like, all right, post, like screw it, let's do it. Um, and with that, it was just like, man, even that in itself made me kind of like think about things of like why was I even feeling that? Like I like why like I'm worried about individuals on the internet, maybe a lot of them that I don't even know. They don't even know me. Like they don't know my whole background, my life. I'm worried about judgment from somebody that is a complete stranger. And with that, it's obviously it comes to the point of just letting go. Like just be like, you know what? Just being comfortable with the fact that somebody is going to judge you no matter what it is. Like even like if you're trying your best in the most humblest way, nicest way possible to explain something, somebody's always gonna have something negative to say. And I've gotten to realize that through Unidos Podemos is like the way that I'm trying to run the account is through humbleness, through education, through not fighting. Even though there's a lot, I get DMs, comments, the whole 9 yards of people just going at it at me for simply explaining a historic, factual event, for explaining a simple feeling of how I feel. It's like, why do you feel the need to talk like this? Like I'm like even like it's taken a lot of work to when somebody's coming at me negatively, I'm still I and through Unidos Podemos, it has helped me to kind of master the way of taking a deep breath before reacting. Because I used to be incredibly reactive before. Like you talk shit to me, I'm gonna talk shit right back. I didn't even think about things, so I wouldn't even. That's what got me in a lot of trouble before, like before being incredibly reactive. Now I listen to people, and when I listen to, I hear the comments. I try to understand where they're coming from. Like, why are they thinking this way? Like, okay. And I try to respond back as humble as possible. As even though maybe in my head I want to be like, fuck you too, I still like that's like fighting words against fighting words. You're not gonna resolve anything there.
Yeah.
And that's it. Like I try not to endow myself in so many conflicts going back and forth with people because if they just don't understand it or don't even try to understand it, then I can't do it for you, man. You know?
I remember back in the day, I was in the Facebook comments all the time when it came to like the Bernie Sanders campaign in 2016 and 2020. I would be debating with people on there, and
Yeah.
Black Lives Matter stuff, like all kinds of things. But I've learned that when it comes to people online who disagree with you, number one, I think what you said is important. Coming in with wanting to share things, number one, with humility, and number two, rooted in just the truth of what's happened, like the truth of the history, right? You're
Yeah.
not coming, and even if you are sharing this like an opinion or feeling, knowing that it's rooted in that history, in that fact, in that truth, I think that's for me what's been really powerful as a way to stand up to those criticisms from people who are going to come onto your page. And if you're coming in and saying something like, we should be proud coming from Mexico or from whatever country you're coming from. You should have the right to feel proud in that history and that heritage. And then someone's coming in here saying, "No, you're in the U.S. Speak English. Be proud to be American." I don't feel the need to correct you because I know where that's coming from. I know that you have a very strong, like the people who come at you with that, they have a strong connection and identity with this idea that their country, their value system is number one. And if you
Yeah.
if you say something different, then it's almost an insult to them. You're challenging their worldview. And so it's not even like who's right and who's wrong. It's you're hurting my feelings and I have to stop you because you're hurting my feelings. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah. No, yeah, that's exactly right. And maybe even if their thought isn't that, oh, the United States is number one, it's just the fact that this, again, what we touched on before, this is all they know. This is the only country that they know. So it's hard for them to understand, how can you like another country so much if this is not where you're from?
I want to add too, though, like I feel like, especially with the kind of stories that I tell, and I know that some of the stories that you tell, when it comes to things like the Mexican American War and how that happened, Mexican repatriation, Operation Wetback,
Yeah.
those moments in history aren't moments that, if you're an American, if you're somebody who this is all you know, this country is number one, this country is the greatest, we fight for freedom, we fight for justice, we fight for democracy. And then you come in and say, here's the time where the US waged an illegal war and stole all this land. And then here's a time where the US loaded people onto trucks and trains and sent them to a place that they never knew, so that they could take the land and take their jobs and take their homes. And here's a time where the US was spraying chemicals on people and poisoning them.
It
That
doesn't matter, man. That's the past. That's the
Yeah.
past. That's a lot of what I would hear, or that I hear. To get over it. Like, you can't get over it because who we are today is a direct reflection of all those events. And yeah, man, like the all those events that you just mentioned is, like, if you go on Unidos Podemos, those are one of the main events that, like, we focus on or trying to, like, highlight. Um, it's a very vague telling of the Mexican American history, but I try to put together the all the events, like big events that kind of like took a part of moving the needle forward of construction the Mexican American culture. Because all in between all those dates, events, there's way more stuff that happened. Right. There's, like, if you dive deeper into it, there's way more. But I try to make it digestive enough for people to see and understand and follow the events.
Yeah,
Like,
because
yeah, we took, where did it start? Where did it begin? How did this become what it is? And that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to pinpoint as best as possible. This is it right here. Like, this is kind of like the foundation. Like, yeah, you can learn more events in between and outside and this and that, like beforehand, afterwards. But this is overall how it started. And then we took a land. Yeah, you moved the line. You moved the line. Now all those Mexicans that were living in Mexico, now it's the United States. And now those people living there, the United States takes over them, mistreats them, takes over their land, pushes them out, even though they told them, we're gonna take care of you and everything like that. Like, we're gonna give you money, we're gonna respect you, all that stuff. With none of that happened. And then comes the fact of, like, a whole event of trying to literally get rid of them, killing them, hunting them, pushing them out, like families, children, women, everything, and then they just can't. They can't get rid of them, so they can't get rid of the Mexican. Excuse me. They can't get rid of the Mexican culture. They're like, okay, we need now. They come to the realization, oh, the United States economy needs to grow. It needs to happen. We need workers. All right, cool. Come here, work for us. They come. What do Mexicans do? Oh, we need work. Oh, we need a better life. Same system. Let's go work. Get mistreated the whole entire time. Wars happen. Mexicans are there. They're serving us in the wars. They're helping with the economy. Like the point I'm trying to drive at is no matter where you're going back in the start of the United States, the Mexican is always gonna be there. The Mexican culture is we're not we're not just a story in the United States. We are the story. We're part of the story that helped build the United States.
Yeah. Yeah, they think people who are again really indoctrinated into like the US is telling of history. Look at all these other things like what happened with Mexico, what happened with all these other countries that we got involved with. They see that almost like as a side quest. It's like that happened over here, but this is the main piece. Or like, no, if it weren't for the story of the Native Americans and what happened to the genocide there, the United States would not exist. If it weren't for the US taking all these people from Africa and using them as enslaved labor to build up their country. There would not be a United States if it weren't for, yeah, like you said, the theft of that, or when it comes to like the Mexican American War, they'll say it wasn't stolen, it was conquered. Okay, cool. You took the land through war, through violence.
Yeah.
And then that became the story of the United States. And then economic warfare and economic exploitation of these countries that helped build the wealth of people here in the United States. And so if you're ignoring all that just because it doesn't look pretty to you, or because it makes people that you take pride in look like, unsavory characters in history, then you're not going to get the full picture. And I think what you were talking about earlier, it's that Leslie's teacher, Ruth, she has a teacher named Ruth who talked about how people want a coherent narrative. They want to understand, how did I get here?
Mhm.
Because if you don't have that full story, you have like a hole, you have a hole in your spirit
Yeah.
that you're just pushing through, put a bandage over that hole and hopefully you make it through life. But once you're able to get the full picture and really understand who you are, who your family is, who your people were, what happened that got us here, and not even just like 200 years ago, but let's go back 25,000 years ago, when people were here in North America. And then how did that lead to 2026?
Yeah.
Like when you fully understand that, you're going to feel a lot more uh whole. You're gonna feel a lot more clear-headed in being able to understand what we're living through.
Yeah, like you mentioned, like there is so much more that happened before the the Treaty Guadalupe Hidalgo. Like, yeah, there's a whole other event, but it's not like the main thing here is Mexican American diaspora, Mexican American culture, at least in Unidos Podemos. This is what we're doing. This is what we've covered. And with that is similar to the video that I mentioned, Mexican American diaspora, how a lot of people were expressing, I didn't even know how I feel like this. Thank you, all this stuff. When we made a post of this explaining this whole Mexican American events, historic events that have happened, I saw a lot of the similar kind of aspect of saying I didn't know that coming from Mexican Americans. And similar to how I was, like, I didn't want before I dove deep into actually caring and understanding this, I didn't know a lot of this stuff either. I was completely ignorant to a lot of the stuff. And I've come to realize when a lot of a lot of the things I posted, like I would feel like, oh, they're gonna make fun of me because oh, they're gonna think I'm dumb because for not knowing this, or like, how do you not know this? Like this is basic, and I come to realize a lot of people don't even when it's your own culture, like we just because simply we have never been educated or talked to about these events. And therefore we don't understand where we come from. And therefore that's where that sentiment or that feeling of those other Hispanics come from. American, from through like my grandfather, my great grandfather is American. like, okay, keep digging. You can like I said, the more you keep digging, like there's no way out of this, my guy. Your family lineage comes from Mexico. Like there's no ends or ways about it, unless you're from like another country, like across the ocean. You have brown skin, you somehow are Hispanic. Your lineage comes from there. So now, whether you still want to have that mindset of I do not care, I am American, I am for ICE, I am for getting my own culture out. Like you don't belong here. I just can't grasp my mind around it. It does not make sense. Like when I hear that from those like Hispanics or Mexican Americans that think that way, it's like now that I see things a lot more clearly and I understand the whole historic things, is like you either you're uneducated or you're belligerent to the history, or you know the history and you're still choosing to not care. If you're choosing to not care, fine. Just be real with it, as opposed to finding other ways to argue because you don't want to admit that you don't care or that you were wrong.
What you said about like you were worried about sharing stuff and people coming at you saying like, "Oh, I already knew this stuff, you know, how did you not know this?" Something I've learned as a former teacher in the classroom and as somebody who talks a lot about history and politics online, you're always going to have, you know, like if the internet or, you know, our country is like 100 people in a room and you're telling a story about something that happened in history, there might be like 5 to 10 people in that room who know that story. But there's a lot
Yeah.
more people who don't know that story. And I've had experiences where I'm like, "Oh, most people know this thing, right? Like, I'm gonna talk about this thing. Most people know what that is, right?" And like, no. You know, I'll be like, you know, one of my favorite historians is Howard Zinn. You know Howard Zinn, right? No, who the hell's Howard Zinn? I look to like the 1960s for me is a big era that I like to study. And I'll be like, you know, some of the people that I really admire is like the Black Panthers. You know about the Black Panthers. And people are like, no, I don't know about the Black Panthers. Do you know who Fred Hampton and Huey P. Newton are? No, I never heard those names. Okay. So the things that I think are common knowledge or that at least a majority of people have heard about, the reality is no. The majority of people at least from our communities, from you know Latino communities, immigrant communities, low income communities, working class families, most people go through school getting the bare minimum they need to pass, and then if they're lucky, they go on to college and university and they start to learn some more, and then most people though they don't have that. They graduate, they go to work, they take care of their family if they have a family. They, you know, hang out with their buddies on the weekends, go to family parties and whatnot, and that's it. And maybe on social media they follow pages like yours and they learn about this history. Again, but that's like a big maybe. So I think that's something that I've come to terms with is if I know something, I can't assume that other people know it right away.
Yeah.
And even if a lot of people do know it, there's always somebody who doesn't. And so me telling that story is going to help that one person who needs to hear it.
Yeah, because like your own with that, I've come to realize that exact same thing that you just mentioned. Like we are subjective to our own mind, because we know what we know. Obviously, like and we feel as a human being, it's a normal human being thing to feel like, because I know this, or I've like you're not self aware of the fact of like this is your own life. You're subjected to everything that you're learning. So you feel, and you put yourself in a position of like, because you know this specific knowledge, everybody else should know it too. And that's not how it works. And that's how I've come to realize a lot more with this account itself, that it's just not it. Like it's not what's what you would think it's a normal piece of knowledge, or a normal piece like thing that somebody should know. They don't. Like that's not to say people are dumb. It's
Mhm.
just that specific individual probably knows a whole bunch of other stuff that you don't. So always keep yourself open to that. Like don't look at people as if they don't know something, be like, oh, you're stupid. That can they could look at you the same exact way for something that they know and you don't.
Yeah, there's a phrase, I think it was like Bill Nye or somebody who said like everybody in the world knows something that you don't. Like that's a fact. But then also what you were saying about if I'm going to a working class neighborhood here in my city of Santana, where I know that these are just, people who are working for a living, building houses, doing roofing, gardening, whatever it is, and they don't know political theory, they don't know history. I'm not going to look down on you because I understand that I've had opportunities. I've been blessed to have opportunities that for whatever reason life didn't give you those opportunities. And so
Exactly.
that doesn't make me better than you. That puts a responsibility on me to help you and people like you to access the knowledge that I know is going to help to empower you. And
Yeah.
something else that we are careful about, like when we talk about organizing work and political work, is when I say empower, it doesn't mean that you have no power and I got to give it to you. It's you have power, but sometimes you don't even realize that that power is there.
You need to
And
give you
so,
the tool to
yeah,
understand your power.
yeah.
Yeah.
So like the knowledge, the language, the vocabulary, and those tools to tap into the power that you have that you don't even know is there because it's been buried, right? As the Kwame Ture says, like the job of the conscious is to help make the unconscious conscious.
I was like that for a long time, and I just didn't care. Like if I knew something, I was like if I knew something and the other person didn't, I was like, oh, you dumb, bro. How you not know that? That's how I thought for a good portion of my life. But that's just belligerence. That's just ignorance. And even with like the account now or any aspect in my life, if what I've come to do a lot now for the past couple of years, if I don't know something, would literally say I don't know. Like I would say I don't know because what I did a lot before, somebody would tell me something, we're having a conversation, or like tell me like you know about this, I'll be like yeah. Even I have no fucking idea, which is, but just because I don't want to sound dumb, I will like. But in that aspect, I'm not helping myself gather knowledge, become more knowledgeable on different things. I'm blocking myself right there. I'm putting a wall on myself as opposed to if I would have said, "I don't know that. Can you tell me a little bit more?" And now they hold and explain it, and now I know something else that I could put in my toolkit if that is what it is. And I do that a lot, or we do that a lot with Unidos Podemos, because there has been a lot of instances where there's a post, we make a post and something might be inaccurate. Maybe we got something wrong, a historic event, or something going on in the world that probably was AI or fake or something like that's something that was wrong. And we'll get DMs, which is like we love the community because we'll get people telling, hey, be careful with your most recent post because this is fake or that's kind of inaccurate or there was a misspelled word here, something. We'll just be like, oh, thank you. We'll look more into it and be like, oh, you know what, you're right. Thank you so much for letting us know. As opposed to being like you don't know, like we're the ones with the bigger account. Like that's I'm not trying to put myself in a position because I have an account that has a whole bunch of followers and you don't. I'm superior. That has nothing to do because there's way more superior, more intelligent people that I am that have no followers. So that's the humbleness that I try to put myself in because like the more humble you are, the more you put yourself below people, you come to have more connections and you gather more tools for your own toolkit by understanding others' experiences. Like it's like you grab from people. Like you mentioned earlier, like you learn to understand other as long as you understand other people's experiences or like learn from them, you gain knowledge from them. You learn from each other.
You served in the military, in the U.S. military, and we talked before about like what led you down that path. I want to just give you some chance to tell that story of, coming from Mexico here to the U.S. and then ending up in the U.S. military. What was that story like for you?
So pretty much like I've since I can remember, I've always had this thing in my mind that I wanted to be in the military. And honestly, I think it probably started I'm pretty sure it started with like my family back home in Mexico. They would always say se va a meter a la marina, ser parte de la marina, but like talking about like the Mexican, like military. And but like to me that was always it was like a joke, like that they always say it because I was like the firstborn boy in the family. So that was like it became like a little running joke. And then obviously the whole transition to the United States happened. And in my head, I translated La Marina. And then when I found out or saw Marines, it's like, oh, this is what it is. And I think that's probably like what made a connection there. And I've always, and it's just like through the whole survival thing and just me understanding that I had to know how to stand up for myself. I had to learn how to fight. I had to learn how to pretty much like have a backbone like when it came to growing up up here. So that started kind of hardening me to being a part of what growing up in the United States is. And then throughout the process, obviously, there was you got your Marine Corps commercials. You will see the Marines in their uniforms, like whenever, like out here in Chicago. Before back in the day, they will come to. It's called Navy Pier out here in the city. They will be out there a lot. During high school, they will come. Obviously, the recruiters will come. Like they're in the dress blues, and obviously in the Marine Corps, the dress blues not to bash down the other, another branches, but we have the best uniform. But if with that is like all that in itself, like I've always said, I want to be a Marine. And at the beginning, it wasn't because it didn't come from I'm proud of being an American and I want to serve, or I'm like I have this internal thing that's driving me to serve because I want to fight for my country. It wasn't even that. It was just like it was in my head. It's hard to describe it. Like it's just I knew that's what I like, or that's what I do. And then obviously through watching movies and everything, I just liked it. I've always liked that, like the military life, and obviously through movies, things are glorified. Going to war, being in uniform, fighting, like learning how to fucking kick people's asses. Like all those glorified things that comes with the military. So with all of that, everything that we spoke about before, it also took it was a big piece of why I just didn't care throughout high school even more, because in my head it was like, if I don't graduate, or it doesn't matter, like if I get bad grades or whatever, I'm going into the Marine Corps anyways. It doesn't freaking matter. So it's always been a thing. It's always been a part of me of being in the Marine Corps. So I joined and I had pretty great success, man. Like because it's what I really wanted to do. Um, like I said at the beginning, it was never really about like I have this internal thing with me that I want to serve for my country. It's just like I wanted to do it. I wanted to get away from the lifestyle that I was in, because if I didn't find something to do, I knew I wasn't going to college. I wasn't going to make it in college. And if I didn't get out of the current situations that I was in, it was the typical cliche story with me. It's either I was gonna end up in jail, or dead somewhere, like, or it's just something was gonna end up negative was gonna happen. And I saw the Marine Corps as a way out. The military was my ticket to try and prove myself that I'm able to make something out of my life here. I felt like it was gonna give me a sense of identify myself. Like I was gonna have an identity,
Mhm.
like being a Marine, because I didn't have one. I didn't understand who I was, and I was like, I'm just lost in this world. First of all, I'm trying to get out of here, and second of all, I just didn't know who I was. And being in the military, that was gonna give me an identity, and it was gonna help me. In my mind, it was like it's gonna help me be a better man, and it did. And if I'm being honest, if I'm like with everything, like being in the Marine Corps changed my life completely around 360. It made me the man that I am today. Obviously, it comes with the sacrifices. It comes with like a lot of negative things that did happen like throughout the military. But essentially, that long story short, that's how I ended up being in the Marine Corps.
Yeah, man. Thank you. And I feel like there's a lot that we can dig into there. I think the first thing I wanted to just dig into, time back to like the whole Unidos Podemos page and like the reason behind that. You said like you didn't feel like you had an identity, and the Marines was your way of like gaining that for yourself to obtain an identity and say,
Yeah.
I am Mario the Marine. So like I think about how there's a lot of ways that young men get pulled in that direction to just like cling to this lifestyle or this aspiration for themselves because of that lack of an identity. not knowing where we come from, not knowing who we are, not having that sense of rootedness in anything. So like I think about like why young boys join gangs. Like they want to, like you said before, like you want to belong somewhere. You want to be a part of something that's bigger than you. So like
Yeah.
did you have anything like that when you were younger, or did you feel like that was just absent?
What, like having an identity, like
Yeah.
growing?
Well, I think like what are your thoughts about just the fact that so many young men especially grow up without an identity? Like what does that feel like? And what did it feel like for you to finally step into that role where you are somebody now? You have that identity that you felt was missing.
It honestly felt like you finally feel like you belong somewhere. Like you're able to see a future for yourself, like now, as opposed to like when I was back home, like just didn't know, like I didn't know, I didn't even know if I had a future. It was like, I didn't even know, like, am I even gonna make it? Like, or like when's the day gonna come? Because like I mentioned before, like, and I was involved in a lot of, not to get into deeper in it, but I was involved in things, Chicago. I was involved in a lot of that stuff. Same thing. I was involved in that because I was trying to find myself an identity. I was trying to fit myself with people, and sadly enough, the people that I ended up kind of connecting with, I saw them as a way like, oh, they could teach me how to fight. Nobody messes with these people. They're really respected here in the hood, in the block. But that wasn't it, obviously. The thing with me is, coming from where I came from, like I was always an innocent kid. I was always very like a mama's boy at the beginning. I've always wanted good for people. I have a soft heart and everything, but just life experiences, the outer shell made it hard. But internally, I'm still that soft kid. I'm still that kid that just wants good for everybody. And even in those circumstances where I was involved with these negative people, doing things or seeing them do things, specific events that happened throughout, Chicago, the neighborhood, I knew it was wrong. I didn't feel good. It didn't like I knew I didn't want this, but some things I would do because, like, oh man, like, again, I don't want to seem like a bitch, or this is what needs to be done in order to be part of this crew, to have this identity. And then just moving forward, when I try pushing away from that, just in a normal life aspect, I guess, sort of say, other like friends, you will see friends talking about, towards the end of high school, you see people like friends talking about, oh, I'm going to this college, or this is what I want to study. This is what I have for my future. This is what I see myself doing 5, 10 years from now. And I could not connect with that. Like I didn't see anything. I didn't have that motivation to be something besides being in the military. That's all I really saw. Um, but yeah, like once I finally made the decision, I joined the Marine Corps. It gives you big sense of pride, obviously, of being a part of something that's way bigger than yourself. Obviously, like you learn to be, at least in my own personal opinion, how my own experience, I learned how to start being more self-aware of things. I started being more disciplined in things, just more detailed oriented, just in the fact, like in the Marine Corps itself, just wearing the uniform itself, every single little inch of the ribbon, everything has to be properly measured, that to how you look in your uniform, to your haircut, to how your shoes are polished, everything has to be perfect. And when in the Marine Corps, when it doesn't come, when things aren't quote unquote, perfect, you just get blasted. We will say you get yelled at. You like, do it perfectly until things get done correctly. And I just thrived in that environment. I ended up kind of like, just like, this is where I belong. Like this is like it's a real for myself. It was a real surreal feeling, understanding. Okay, I have this future, especially in the military, at least in the Marine Corps, everything is laid out for you. And especially now that I mentioned before, like I've come to realize, understand that I have ADHD, and this is probably why I succeeded in the military, because everything was just so structured. but everything is laid out for you to succeed. Like in order for you, you start off with ranks. If you want to be this rank, you have to do this. You have to learn these skills. You have to do these courses. You have to learn how to do this by this specific time, and then you pick up. And then the next rank starts, and so on and so forth. Like this is what you have to do. Everything's laid out. So it was perfect for me. Like, okay, this is what I need to do. And I was able to see my future now. Like I was actually like, oh man, like this is what I could do with my life. This is where I could end up in. And then obviously, as time came by, deployments came. Is a whole nother world, being in a deployment, being in those situations, other life experiences, different things that you get to see, and lifestyles with them when it comes with being in the other side of the world in those type of situations.
I appreciate you sharing all that. And something that stands out when you're talking about, what was it that kind of led you down that path, and then what were the aspects that you felt like served you or that really kind of benefited you in your trajectory. Something that we talk about in the work that we do is like the language of needs. So again, like if you ask people like what needs does a human being have, like what would you say?
Like needs, like you need food, you need shelter, you need clothes.
Yeah, like very basic stuff, right? But something that we try to expand on is like as a human being, as like a whole person, you need lots more than just food, water, shelter. You need connection, you need purpose, you need love, you need understanding, you need expression, you need identity, you need community, right? And so like I feel like what I'm hearing when you're talking about your time in the military is that there were a lot of those needs that for whatever reason, for whatever the circumstances were, weren't being met at the time. And then like that life in Chicago meets some of those needs. You do have identity, you do have community, you do
Mm.
have respect in whatever warped way that looks, but there's also parts of it that aren't right, or that aren't for you, that are gonna land you in jail or dead on the street somewhere.
Sadly, like you do have those guys in those situations that like I don't know like they're just zoned into like this is what it is. I'm part of this life. This is what I gotta do. That's it. Like there's nothing else. And then you had like guys like me that like who still kind of like pull back is like I'm not trying to do this, but I need to do it in order to survive somehow here.
Yeah, so it's like that nuance of it's not right for you. But I think like what you're saying with some of the people who stay in that life, it's a sense of like helplessness and also like normalized. Like this is what I know. My family was in this, my friends were in this.
Oh
Uh
yeah,
and,
100%.
and so like I don't have issue with the negative sides because that's just the way it is. So I'm gonna put up with that. And if I end up in jail, all right, that's cool. I got my stripes and I'm gonna get out and now I got even more respect. But like to carry that on to the conversation around like the Marines, like it's a similar dynamic, right? So you step into the Marines and you have that identity, you have that, you were talking about how you grew up undiagnosed ADHD, and now here's this environment where everything's laid out for you, and we're going to hold you to it. We're going to blast you if you step out of line so that you learn to stay disciplined, you learn to stay detail oriented. And then that important part though, what you're saying about like I see a future now because
Mm.
for whatever reason you didn't see. I remember when I was growing up, I didn't have a very uh rough upbringing. My mom went to work, I went to school. It was pretty, boring, straightforward stuff. But I remember being like a teenager and being like, I don't know what I'm gonna be doing 10 years from now. Like I remember being okay with the idea that if I'm dead at 30, whatever. And then I go to college and I start to learn, and I'm like, oh, I'm actually learning that there's a lot out there that I want to learn more about, and there's a lot more that I want to do. I had my son at 22, and then I'm like, all right, now I have to stick around. I don't have the choice to dip out because I'm going to raise this human being. But there's a lot of people out there, I feel like in our community who don't find that, who don't have that sense of here's where I belong and here's where I'm going. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I think like with that, it has a lot to do as well with the communities that like you mentioned that we are raised in, that we come from, like especially in the Hispanic Latino communities. There's not many talks of, for example, I didn't know what a mentor was. I've never heard of that word. I never learned, like I mentioned it before, like I've never understood or really acknowledged that I could be wealthy, or I could be rich, like I could like understand that there's other things that I could be to be successful. Because like if I'm also being honest and thinking about putting myself back in my shoes when I was younger, even though yeah, I had this whole aspect laid out in my head about being a Marine, I felt, knowing the way that I am, knowing that I'm always seeking things to learn and different journeys and like just experiment. If I was to have had an individual or something that was able to go into somebody something taught me, showed me different layouts of life and opportunities of what and how you're able to accomplish them, I might have been a little more open to, okay, maybe I could follow this path as opposed to the military. Like I could see a straight layout here. This sounds cool. And then the military is over here. It's just something that I said I was gonna do. Like it's just the fact that we don't have those opportunities there. Like they're never really pushed on us. It's always more of a, at least speaking for myself, is go to school, get good grades. If you don't get good grades, if you don't go to college, what the hell are you gonna? You're gonna, at least like how my mom implemented like, trying to implement success into me was by fear. Like she worked in factories her whole time since we were here. And she's always like, "Do you want to end up working in a factory like I do? Like, do you want to do you want to wake up at 4:30 in the morning like I do, go work in this?" And like, so I have this negative connotation with goddamn factories because of my mom. Like, I just never wanted to go work in a fucking factory. And with that, it was also another thing. It was like, I'm going to the military. Fuck being in a factory, you know. But again, because I just didn't know, and being in the military opened up a whole world of things that I was able to do. So either or, like I'll still open up this different world. However it is that I manage, was it in the military or if somebody was to have talked to me before, the fact about it is that we just do not have these resources in the neighborhoods that we grew up in order to help our young ones or yeah, like the teenagers understand what they're capable of doing.
100% agree. My mom, she worked in factories too. She started cleaning houses. Like she had her own business cleaning houses, and I remember we'd go and help her out and babysitting kids and rich white people's houses. And then she got a job at a factory. Her whole yeah, but um, that thing about not having those paths to success, and if somebody had just come in and shown like this is an option, I think to go back to what we were talking about earlier where there's this idea that people have when it comes to history of this doesn't affect me or politics even like, oh, I don't politic because that doesn't affect me. I'm trying to take care of myself. But when people understand how do we get to a point where we have so many young people in our communities who feel lost, who feel helpless, who feel like there's no opportunities for them, who can't see what a future, a happy, successful future looks like outside of, the activities in the neighborhood, or if I'm lucky enough to go to college and go to university, then maybe I can have a future. And if that's out the door, then what else is there? Maybe I can join the military and that'll give me an opportunity. I feel like that's
Mhm.
something that, Leslie and I, we talk about that a lot. Like our families deserve to have that. Our families deserve to have options and support, resources, mentors, job opportunities, educational enrichment opportunities, so that if a kid feels like they don't know what to do, there's not just like two ropes dangling that they can grab onto, but they got all kinds of options, all kinds of doors that they could walk into. Um, but then also I want to just recognize too. I feel like sometimes, at least in my content, I know that I'm really critical about like the U.S.'s actions in wars abroad and the history of the U.S. military, but I don't necessarily disparage people who join for whatever reasons, right? So like You're joining
Yeah.
because you felt like you needed to do what you needed to do. And I also don't want to dismiss the ways that it did help you, right? Because I feel like sometimes people, like you said, want to see things black and white. Military bad. If you join the military, you're bad. Uh, but there's the nuance of the military can offer you that structure. It can offer you that purpose. It can offer you those opportunities that maybe you didn't have otherwise. And also, we can look at the ways that the military maybe caused some personal harm to the people who served and has done harm to people around the world where the military has operated. So, I want to give you just some to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, pretty much everything that you just mentioned is and everything that I laid out, how it's helped me and made me pretty much the guy that I am today. At the end of the day, if I'm really looking at it, I've I was just a number in the military. Like personally in my own life, like yeah, I was able to evolve and be better. But if I'm looking at it at a higher context, more rounded, yeah, it's just a number. I was just another individual in the military that they're able to utilize to for whatever aspect it is that the government needed. And yeah, I like similar with everything else that I mentioned. I've always been very ignorant to not understanding the history of things, and I didn't really care. All I cared for when I was joining the military, I was in the process was like, hell yeah, I'm gonna be in the military, especially a Marine. I'm gonna go to war. I was excited to go to war. I'm gonna go kick ass and everything like that. Everything's exciting until you're there, until you're actually seeing how shit goes down. And with that, it's like now being out of the Marine Corps for a couple of years now, and like diving more into understanding the history of the United States in itself, especially specifically like war events that we have done like gone down. What drove me through this doing this as well as like the whole event of like pulling out of Afghanistan because I myself was in Afghanistan. I got to see the people in their little towns. And these some people live in mud huts, you know, like the poorest of the poor that you could probably see, and you would still see the kids running around smiling and happy, and it was a difficult context to like how is it that through the media or even through like talks in the military in itself that they're painting these people as this evil. Like, yeah, don't get me wrong. Like, yeah, you had your ISIS, the Taliban, and everything. Yeah, those like were around. They're real. They're incredible. Like, they were fucked up people. But at the same time, it's like the way I saw it was like it's no different than the narco in Mexico. You had you had your communities of people, like many people, innocent people, just trying to live their life, trying to like go about living their daily lives, and then you have the narco over here like doing their shit, like doing like fucking stuff up that has nothing to do with these innocent people. And then obviously going pushing back again. Now I'm out of the military, understanding how things happen, how just from Vietnam to how Iraq happened to how the Afghan whole happened. It's like there's just so much unanswered questions from the government. There's more uncertainty than actual certainty, like in knowledge from the government that I feel like it's not even myself. I feel like this is just how the world itself feels right now. Like we just have no trust in the government anymore. No matter like what side you see yourself on, I feel like on both sides, people do not have that trust in the government. Like, and it's because of all of this. And seeing how things went down and why things happen makes it's a very difficult feeling to process because like I was involved in all of this. I was in it, like I saw things, went through stuff, and it's like understanding the actual events of why it is that we were there is like this was pointless. Like this is like why the fuck were we even there in the first place? You know, Not the government or like the higher people on top were to actually explain and be truthful, which I don't believe it's ever gonna happen. Then it'd be like, okay, I understand. Like but I just don't feel like that's ever been addressed properly. So I know I'm not the only one. I've talked to a lot of buddies of mine. They feel the same. I've lost a couple buddies, like not even while we are over there. Just a lot of them lost to the war back home. They again, it's a lot to process. I understand their mindset. It was like, is that fear. Every time I heard of another buddy, my buddy go down, it was like it drove that fear in me. It's like they were fine. Like they were, it was like you never think that they were, like, you knew that we all had our thing going on, but I didn't think this was a possibility. And when every single time that it happened, it drove that thing into my own head, be like, is there something that like clicks and that just makes us do it? So it's like that fear that I've always had. Um, but yeah, like with that, now saying like I get I love it's a bittersweet feeling to explain because I love the person that I am because of the military. And I also have that dread of like, now that I'm more knowledgeable and informed on things, it's like, fuck, like it's a process that you have to go through it and work on it on yourself. And at the end of the day, you just have to be like, you know what, it happened. I understand it. Just work through it as best as you can, and just move on with life, like as best as you can, man.
First off, my condolences for, your buddies who've fallen over here because of the weight of what went down over there. And, hopefully I'm hoping that you got the support you need and that you're checking in on yourself because I know that can take its toll.
For sure, man. No, I've definitely been I re I rely a lot heavily on my family. I got two little ones, my wife. The way I see things is like, yeah, it sucks. Sometimes I understand the thought and the feeling of it's just easier just to fucking, you know. But at the same time, it's like I put myself in the shoes. It's like I'm gonna be giving my family way more pain, and I don't want to give my kids pain. I love them too much. So that's never gonna happen. It's just like it's. I think I'm sounding a little more more down and more depressed, and like, I don't want to make it
No,
seem
no, but
like that.
it's
But
real.
it's just I'm trying to like relay like the processes of everything that's happened just due to the military itself. Now
Yeah.
that we're on the subject.
Yeah, and again, it's just the reality. Like that's something that, there's hashtags and campaigns to bring awareness to the
Yeah.
psychological toll that it takes on people who have served. So, we got to name that. But I also wanted to, point to, so, like I mentioned, Howard Zinn is somebody that I really look to when it comes to understanding history and the US's role in all these different countries around the world. And you were talking about how like people just don't have that trust in the government anymore when it comes to military action or any kind of intervention. Howard Zinn was talking about how what the trajectory has been throughout the US's history of why we need to get involved in this country or that country. Like in the 1800s during that expansion era where they were going into like the Philippines, and the early 1900s, going to like all these Latin American countries and Puerto Rico and Haiti. Like the idea was we have to help these people because they are underdeveloped and they're uncivilized, and we're going to go bring democracy and civilization to those places. And then later on during the Cold War with the Soviet Union, the story was communists and socialists are taking over these different places and they're evil and they got horns underneath their hats, and if we don't stop them, they're going to come and do terrible things to your wife and your kids over here. And so
Yeah.
like we have to fight and go into all these different countries for that reason. We have to stop Vietnam because they're going to become communists, and then that's going to spread and take over the world. And then fast forward to the the terrorism era, the war on terror that you see with Iraq
I-
and Afghanistan, and now we're going into Iran. And so it's that narrative has always been there of there's evil here and we have to stop it. There's evil here and we have to stop it. There's evil here and we have to stop it. But like you
yeah.
said, like we're reaching that point where with the war in Iran, they're not even trying to convince people that there's evil there and we have to stop it. They're saying there's oil there and we got to get it, you know?
Mm.
And so, I just want to get your thoughts on like, where do you think we are right now? And, as a former somebody who has served, where do you see the sort of, what do you call it? Where are people landing in the military aspect, in the military community, when it comes to the direction that our country's taking when it comes to these military actions?
Yeah, man. Like at least in my own life, from talking to buddies and even just listening to other veterans on the internet, like it seems to be the same concept, the same knowledge. Like, I mean, the same like thought process that I just mentioned. Like it's like we're all coming to this realization of like what the fuck was is all this for? Like this is not what we were told that we were going to be going into to do because of this the specific, at the end of the day it start like you start seeing it as in the United States just wanting to do whatever the fuck they want and going into other countries and then painting like you mentioned, like painting these people or specific generalizing people of they're evil, we have to stop them, or like they have this specific thing that going to come that will harm us, we need to stop them. It's always that same aspect, and it always comes up in the future that it wasn't true. Like none of that was true. Like where was all these things that was talked about, and now being out and understanding all this is it's a whole different toll in itself. Especially if you were deployed, if you were one of the military members of deployed and saw the world, it's a whole nother type of process that you have to go through to understand. Because I've also had a lot of younger, Hispanics, Latinos message me through DMs, and it's hard to get back to all of them because they all have the same questions. Like, I want to be in the military. I'm looking to join the military, but X, Y, and Z because all these things happen. I don't know what to do. Like, what's your opinion and stuff like that. And I've been meaning to like make some type of content acknowledging this, but it's like if you want to join the military, the way that I see it now, especially now in today's and age that we have, you have the phone that you're able to search anything up and become knowledgeable in anything. If you choose not to understand something, that's the way I see it. That's your fault now because you can very easily become knowledgeable. If you want to join the military, I say first educate yourself on how everything has gone down. Everything that I just mentioned, all the historic events of war in the United States, why it is that it happened, how it happened, what happened during the process of the war. Because could only personally speak for, like, for example, in Iraq and Afghanistan. I didn't go to Iraq, but I was in Afghanistan. I saw Afghanistan things, and then I had a lot of buddies while serving that served in Iraq, and I heard a lot of stories of how everything went down. For explaining the short, it was bad. It's a lot of crazy stories, but yeah, I would say like be knowledgeable, understand, and truly see why it is that the military is what it is, why you will even be deployed. Like all be well-rounded, knowledgeable, and if after you do this and you feel like okay, I truly understand and I still want to serve, I still have that calling, more power to you. Hey, that's your choice. At that point, like you have the knowledge, you understand what you're getting yourself into. Hey, go ahead forward to it. But if you were more like me and be like, oh, I just want to join because I want to join. There's nothing, there's nothing else for me. Sometimes I still see the fact, like, it's the only option. It's either I'm gonna die or like here if I don't do something, this is my only chance. I understand that too. Like there's no sentiment of bad sentiment for me on that. But if you actually have a choice and like you have the chance to properly, if you're just doing it like, oh, I want to have free college, or I'm doing it for my parents to get on papers, even, all of that is respectable. It's still a respectable thing why you would want to do something. But again, even in those aspects, become extremely knowledgeable in everything. Understand what you're getting yourself is. It all comes down to that. Just understand what you're getting yourself. into before you sign a paper, because like at least in the Marine Corps, you're signing you're signing the contract for 8 years. A lot of people think it's only 4 active. You do 4 active, and then after the 4, you decide if you want to sign a contract and re-enlist again. But even if you decide to get out after the 4 years, the government still owns your ass for a couple more years until that full contract is over. And so yeah, there's a lot of fine print everywhere. There's a lot of education that you need to do yourself. Just become knowledgeable. That's it. That's all I could really say. Understand it. And if after you understanding it, you're still like, I want to do it, hey, go for it. Because there's a lot of good things that could come out of it, that you will grow, but understand that there will be a lot of other negative things too.
Me as a dad, as a former teacher, as somebody who tries to do what we can to help our community out here in Santana, like for me, that's one of the most heartbreaking parts. It's that desperation aspect that I feel like I wish it wasn't the case. Whereas like I can't imagine paying tens of thousands of dollars to go to college, and these guys are offering to pay it for me. All right, I'm down. I can't imagine being able to buy a home, and they have subsidies and the what is it called, the GI Bill that's going to help me get a cheaper home. Okay, I'm gonna take that. Or my parents are undocumented, and if I don't take this step, then they might be sent back to another country, and now I don't have my parents around anymore. Like I wish that wasn't the case.
When I have talking to a couple younger guys and even my siblings as well. As like I have told them, like, if that is your only like thing, that you wanted to join the military because you want the free college or like get papers for your parents, go reserves. Don't do active, because if you're going in with that mindset that that's all you want, like in my head, in my experience, you're not you're not gonna make it in active duty. Like you're just, I don't feel like you're at least in the Marine Corps. I'm speaking like specifically Marine Corps. But I always tell my, even though I'm a Marine, I always tell like I have told them those, like, if you want to do that, that's the only reason you want to do, just do reserves. Do reserves and do it in the Air Force Reserves or Navy Reserves. Air Force and Navy, they have way more career plans, like more opportunities in those branches. And obviously, if you do Army or Marine Corps, like it's all mostly just rah rah, like fucking like move forward and stuff. Like, yeah, there is some good careers in there, but my advice would be do reserves, because all you do is like 1 week in a month. Like 1 week in a month, you're putting, it's like you're putting your toe in the water. You're getting the feel for what the military is. And if you end up liking it, and if you're like, I could do this full time, this is what I actually want, then hey, sign a contract for active. But that would be, I guess, my advice, if that's the only path. Like, do reserves. That's it.
I know that we're way over time, but I appreciate
That's
it.
a good conversation, man.
Yeah. I want to just give you the final word. If there's anything else that you wanted to share, if there's any, just final message for whoever's listening.
Just the final message, like with everything, gathering everything that we talked about, is with Unidos Podemos, like the account, whether you follow it or not, like the mission behind it is understanding your history. Because when you understand your history with whatever it is, whether it's Mexican American history, whether it's American war history, whatever it is, understanding, being knowledgeable makes you understand the power that you have, and that nobody could take that away from you.